Hello everyone, Yasin here. Welcome to my channel, and today we are going to talk about how I mixed this. If you like the demo, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Before we start talking about the mixing, there is one important point. This video is made for JST X-Tension. Thanks to JST team for sending me this nice plugin. I want to talk about it right now. It's not sponsored or anything, but if I don't talk about it right now, I have to talk about it every single time, and I have a lot of instances. I just want to explain once, and after that we'll just talk about what I did. JST X-Tension is kind of a delay reverb plugin. It's actually made for audio design, and if you have a really nice source tone, it actually does wonders. It feeds the delayed version to the original sound, and it smoothens out a little bit, and I really like what it does to my guitars. I also use that in the snare and room, which I will talk about it. It's a different and weird use case, but I think it worked well to me. And finally, I also use it in the samples. So if you have sample packs or splice, probably you can come up with very interesting stuff. Especially all the impacts, all the drones, you can change their timbre by using this plugin, and you can come up with a different feeling to add it to your demo or a song. You can also download the free trial. In this description there is a link. It's not affiliate or anything. You can just Google the name, but I just want to help you a little bit. Just download the free trial, do a little bit of experimentation, use it in your demos, in your songs, and hopefully you will like it. Let's start talking about the mixing. So I did mixing and mastering in the same project. I will talk about it a little bit, but since my last mixing rundown demo was 2 hours, I wanted to save a little bit from time for myself and for you as well. And what I'm going to do, I will explain everything. I will do the A/B on the main section, and hopefully it will be interesting for you as well. Let's start. So the first one is actually my final limiter, which is the Flatline. Thanks Submission Audio for sending me. It's amazing. It's pretty easy to use, and after using this one, and especially in the hybrid mode, with changing transients and sustain, these parameters were something that I didn't experiment on before, so I really like it. But special to this demo, I wanted to try the limit because I was always using hybrid and I want to have a change. So these demos are also kind of an experimentation for me as well. I'm experimenting the plugin, of course, but at the same time I'm experimenting what I can do to make it a little bit more pleasant for myself, and I'm thinking about my workflow constantly. So I use the limit mode here, and I have -11 to -12 of loudness. I am not pushing it more just for the sake of it. I don't like that too much, and I like to keep the dynamics a little bit. I think about snare and kick and how much reduction I do on that, and this is not the only place I think about snare, so I think it's kind of fair to think about the overall loudness and what am I actually processing over. The next one is Soothe. One more detail before I talk about Soothe. I'm not gonna disable Flatline because it does not have a gain match bypass. So if I disable it, it's gonna affect the whole loudness situation, and I don't want you to affect it this much, basically. So Soothe, I'm using a preset here. If you don't know, this is a dynamic EQ working through the whole spectrum, and depending if you're sidechaining or not, it is ducking certain areas. You can change how selective it is, how sharp it is, and it's a brilliant plugin and it helps a lot. You're gonna see Soothe everywhere in my project. And this is just a preset that I use for the mastering. It does pretty small stuff, but at the same time it is really important to have this kind of smoothing and controlling over the spectrum, because with the mastering everything is kind of small and adds up. That's why I always have this. The next one is Ozone Suite, and I use Master Assistant. I'm not doing too much. I'm not wise guy when it comes to mastering process. I always start with the Master Assistant. I disable everything and I think about what needs to be added. I enable one by one, and if it sounds good and if I feel like it, I do the enabling, and after that I maybe move it around a little, push or pull it a little, and if it's okay to me, I just leave it there. So for this one, on the EQ, it tamed the lows, it pushed the mids a little, and on the high mid, it did some cuts. I am assuming that I pushed the bass and definitely the kick a little bit too much, and my guitars were not present enough, and my lead guitar was a little bit harsh and pushed. So these changes are coming from there. And the number 8, which is the high shelf boost, it is subtle and it's affecting actually a lot of different areas, especially overheads, and I really like how it adds up. The next one is dynamics. I have this crisp mid-range preset that I used. I didn't use all of them. I didn't try all of them, but I actually really like what this one is doing, which is mostly working over the lows and low mids. It's not kind of triggered in these areas. And when I use it, because of it stuck in the low parts, the mid section is pushed a little bit more. Instead of cutting this area, we're boosting this area. You can think of it like that basically. And I really like how it works. And dynamic EQ, normally I don't touch, but I listen a little bit. And in this one, it was just taming and it was pretty nice to have, so I just kept it. So if you have Ozone, it helps a lot. I can just say that. The next one is virtual tape machines, and for this one, I went for a little bit more analoginess. I used that word before. I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist. And it is set to 30 IPS. I think it was kind of derived from Nolly's preset. And the next one is Gullfoss Master. I love Gullfoss, both mix and master. I put it side by side here. Usually I have plugins before this one and after this one, but in this demo, it's like I am using them one after. I'm pretty sure it's not a problem, but I didn't do a really nice experimentation on putting them right after, because Gullfoss Master is doing a little bit smaller movements than the Gullfoss mixing, so it's kind of worth to think about. I put some recover. I always go for less than 10%. I pushed a little bit of tame. I always had some bias around 5 to 10. And I always brighten up a little bit. I start from 10, just go back until I'm kind of happy, and I stay there. And I never ever boost here. I really don't know why. I think boost is kind of for if it's taming too much and not recovering too much, you can just put it back, pull it back, That's kind of the idea, but I never touched that. So what we're gonna do here, I will disable all of them except Flatline, and I will enable them one by one. Let's start. The biggest effect was Ozone, but it has like 3 different processing blocks, so it's kind of fair. It's a mastering suite. And beside that, I think it was really nice. Gullfoss opened up the mix. Snare was much better and open. I also felt the whole drum mix a little bit pushed. And with the Ozone, I think it tamed the whole mix in a good way, I should say. And for the mix bus, what we have here is gray and red compress and Gullfoss mix. With the gray, what I do is taming and gluing the snare. For reds, gluing the snare, but also overall the song, all the peaks, I should say. And for the Gullfoss mixing, what we have here is a big recover and big tame, because I trust this plugin a lot. I mean, it's not the biggest move. You can even make 200%, but I'm kind of okay with these settings. I increased the bias a little bit more with this, especially with the demos. I trusted a little bit more. And I again brightened a little bit. And what I'm going to do again, disable these, and you're going to hear one by one. especially with Gulfos, I, hear everything. Like, whole drum is kind of pushed, and overheads especially, it's much more present. It's amazing. The next one is usually instrument bus, but I didn't put any processing here. Usually, if I have vocals, I send it to mix bus. If I have FX samples, which I have here, I send it to mix bus. And anything else usually goes instrument bus. And of course, orchestral layer. If I have any orchestral instrument, I don't send it to instrument bus. I send it to mix bus. I'm doing this because I don't want them to be affected by the processing I made. Especially gray and red is usually in the instrument bus for me. So that's an important detail I wanted to mention. Since I don't have too much stuff happening, basically, I didn't have any instrument bus processing here. Let's continue. I also left parallel reverb and parallel compression empty here because I don't feel a need of it, and I did the parallel processing, or parallel compression I should say, and the drum bus, which is actually where we are going right now. So with the drums, I should explain. Let me talk about the drum kit first. I used P5 on a Draco Grass full turbo preset. Since it's a demo, I wanted to act a little bit faster here. I like the P5 sound, and I like how Noli works on these drum mixes, so that's why I left it as it is. But I'm using toms and the snare and the kick here, and I am supporting it with One Kit Wonder Architects. I'm using all the overheads from this. I am also augmenting a little bit the kick and the snare, and toms, they're muted completely. So what we do, let's start from the drum bus. The gains you see, it's for leveling the template, and after that the next one is if I want to cut or boost it a little bit, the whole drum bus, I'm adding it later. So usually I have one gain here and one gain in the finishing process, I should say, and in the middle I have what I'm doing. This is Noli's preset. It does wonders. It does a really nice magic. Before, I don't know, 2022, this processing was done in the instrument bus, but Noli changed it to the drum bus, and this is the parallel compression done. Usually I move the exact preset to the parallel compression bus, and I'm sending my kick, my toms, my snare, my guitar, and sometimes my bass to the parallel compression, and I use this distressor with these settings, and depending on how much I'm sending for each individual instrumentation, I get a different result, and I level them after. And for this one, it was pretty much great already, so I kept it in the drum bus and I didn't move it to the parallel compression bus. And let me talk about the kick now. I have just one sooth side chained to the bass, so whenever bass is playing in this area, I'm creating some space, so bass will be a little bit more present and not masked by the kick. And I have oxide tape again for the analoginess, which is a word that doesn't exist, and I use oxide tape for the analog effect, and I have the low IPS value here for effect in the low end, and it does a really nice push here. For the snare, I have this virtual tape machine. I am using this one instead of the oxide tape. Comes and goes. I'm kind of experimenting both of them and understanding what kind of effects they have over the snare. So for this one, I used the virtual tape machines. And again, I just crank it up a little bit. I'm not a fan of pushing it to the end. I don't think it helps. At least in my demos, it doesn't help. The next one is actually JST X-Tension. So this is the first time I'm going to talk about it. In this context. So what I did here, usually I add a reverb to snare, and I said, okay, so I need to have this dark ambient effect, and what happens if I put it to snare instead of a regular reverb plugin that I go to. And I think it paid off because it was pretty interesting. It cuts a little bit short and the mix value, of course, is pretty low. And what it does, I think I can isolate this. I will talk about all the drum bus and isolate everything. Sorry, not isolate everything. What I'm going to do is disable all the plugins, then enable them and show to you kind of an A/B. But in this case, I just want to talk about, since this plugin was the main driver of this demo and this mix rundown, I just want to talk about it a little bit and isolate wherever I use this. So let's do it. I'm going to disable and you're going to hear. As you can hear, it gives a low rumble and some feeling that is kind of pretty hard to match. I actually didn't hear something like this in any other convolutions, at least in the Apple Zone plugin. And it was pretty interesting. I really think that I can use something like this more often, but it depends on the context, so it's just a small note that I have in mind. I will also name this one so I can share it with you. So it's gonna be Snare Magic, and I saved it for you. So it's gonna be in the description. Let me go to toms. I only have Saturn here where I push the highs a little. It's over 2K, and I also added a little bit of drive. I am doing this to make them a little bit more present. Normally I do even more than that, and I'm also doing the individual processing with Saturn on rack tom and floor toms, but for this one I applied it over the toms and I made it a little bit more excited. So for the overheads, I have this vintage console EQ. I think this is some kind of a Pultec. I don't know the gears. I never hold a studio gear that is kind of pluginized before, so all I have is the plugin, so I'm not quite sure which EQ is this one based on, but I added all kind of stuff. It is 110 ducked a little bit, and we have some push on the mid gain. It is 4.3K, and I also added 2 dB on highs. So that's all. And beside that, the output model is punchy, if you're asking. And I pushed it a little bit, the drive, like the 4. And the next one is Soothe again. And this one has rhythm guitars. So wherever rhythm guitars are present or have their own attacks, I push overheads down because they are everywhere and they're clashing, and I don't want guitars are masked. I don't like it, and most of the time my problem is with the overheads, so that's why I created this preset, and it was pretty helpful for me. Let's go to the room. We have the gain to set it, and we have JST X-Tension. Let me also save this preset so I can share it with you. Room Magic. So we have a little bit more in length because usually the room is providing the whole room feeling and the reverb. That's why even though mixes a little bit, I added this long length, and width is also pretty much cranked up. And I filtered it a little bit. I didn't want to add too much rumble. And for the post-processing, we have this 50 to 2K kind of filter. Let me isolate this and disable. As you can hear, and especially if you heard after I stopped, it is affecting small amount, but is providing an atmosphere. This is the word that I actually should use in the beginning, because providing this atmosphere is not easy, and so far I had a lot of samples that I used, a lot of drones that I use for this purpose, but nothing helped me this much as this plugin did in the last couple of weeks. And I really liked it for this reason. I'm not quite sure if I would use it in the room again. I don't know. I really like the small low end, small breathe, small atmosphere that is bringing. But I'm also thinking that if I use this one so much in everywhere, probably it's gonna add up in certain areas. For that reason, I'm trying to be careful, and that's why actually the mix knob is pretty much almost zero. It's like 5% or something like that. And what I'm gonna do now, I'm going to give you an A/B with the whole section. Everything is enabled and disabled. As you can hear, these plugins, especially when I disable and enable them all together, affecting a lot. And it's also affecting the end results, so end processing. So I'm aware of that. I just want to give you a quick A/B. And for that reason, I showed you this, guys. So the next one is the bass. And what I did with the bass is not a big movement at all. I just want you to check this EQ where I cut. I want a low end build up, so I cut this area. After that, I push the main and root frequencies a little. I cut this low mid, and what normally my move is much bigger than this, but I wanted to have a little bit more of the low mid. I am using, by the way, I forgot to show you that. How? This is Submission Audio's Nocturnal bass. This is actually first time I'm using this in a demo. I'm really interested in this one because it fits to a lot of genres, and it is such a classic bass, and it is captured pretty well. And that's why I programmed this, and I'm actually using one of the presets called Respect the Chunk, but I changed all the parameters on the mixer depending on what I'm hearing. And with the Infinity EQ, if you go back, we have this small cut again, and I also pushed a little bit in the 2.5. Okay, these are the moves that I did while listening in the demo. So that's why I don't remember all the details. I'm sorry. It was probably more present, so I just want to keep it. Next one is double tap. This thing is great. I love it. And it is helping a ton. It is a two-stage compressor. First, low compression works, and after that, overall compression works. And if you hover it, it actually gives you the ideal values, and you go a little bit back, forth. And I also watched Ermin's video about this. So these are not linear. It looks like 1 dB, 3 dB, 5 dB or something like that. So you need to use your ear a little bit more. It's fine, and I really like how this one works. After doing some low compression, I cut it a little bit, probably to clean up, and after that, for overall compression, I just boosted it a little bit and make it a little bit more present, and I used the glue in the saturation. The next one is Soothe again, and this is an amazing preset. And what I do here is to create space for the kick, as the preset tells. That's something I set in the previous demos and I'm using everywhere now. And it's also pretty selective. It's only happening for the kick, and it's acting fast, it's acting hard. And when I enable and disable this, you will realize that how much it is masking the kick if I don't use the Soothe. You can use multiband compression, you can use dynamic EQ, of course, as sidechained. And when you use those, it's also fine, but Soothe acts a little bit more and in precision, because if I change the kick now, change the augmentation, do something weird, I don't know, it will work for that as well. I don't have to double check all the parameters. And lastly, I have the oxide tape, again in the 7.5 on the IPS, to work on the lower end. And add some analoginess, like it's a word. Let me disable everything, and you're gonna hear, hopefully, the bass in action, and I will enable everything one by one. Or I will enable everything one by one. It helps a ton. Double tap make it just, pushed and present. Infinity EQ just cleans up. I should just say, clean up, because that's how I use it mostly. There are two areas where it pushed, 2.5K, and the main area, like the 100 area. Let me check it again. So if you are interested, yeah, it is 93.5. And for Soothe, it's just make the kick more present and clear. And oxide tape is just pushing the lows a little bit and give the analog feeling. The next part is the rhythm guitars. And for rhythm guitars, what we have tonal wise, I add Dr. Drive everywhere with a lot of attack. I used mainly Archetype Noli X. And for lowering it down, I still have the same thing. Lowering it down, I mean, I used the Buster trick. Here I transpose one octave down, and I didn't add the fatso here. And what I do, I cut everything after to 150 hertz, and I also still have the high pass here because I need to have this. This is very important for me. I really don't want to have the build up on the low end. That's why. And it is making it a little bit more full when it comes to the guitars. And I here and there use the octaver. Octaver is coming from reverb, and I didn't use anything else here, only the pedal section. And the tone is actually kind of same. So that being said, let's go to the rhythm guitar bus, which I did. It looks like a little bit too much, but I assure you it's not. So I give it a nice cleanup. Anything below that 92 is cut. It's not a hard cut, of course. Same goes for anything above 11.4. I usually, depending on which kind of guitar, if it's extended range or low tuning or not, I change this low pass depending on what am I doing and what kind of tone I have. And I did some pushing in the 250 area, which I normally don't do too much like this, and normally my cut is not here around 600, so I probably heard something. We have some push around 1.75K and another cut in the 4K area. This is just to give more space and make the guitar a little bit more smoother, and I also didn't want to lose too much from the guitars. Next one is the Pro MB. This is to control the guitar's palm muting, my palm muting basically. And this is a very well-known technique, so I'm not going to talk about it in detail. The virtual mix rack has FGS and FG401 added. You can use 401 in everywhere. With all the instruments, it's working pretty nice and well. This is the electric guitar preset. I set everything to, default values. I also turn it off depending if it's, if there's something that I didn't see. And I enable them and I set after that depending on what I hear. And I didn't go for, anything other than, 2-3 dB of compression with this. Again, it depends on the part, depends on the context, but I don't want to push too much, especially when it comes to rhythm guitar. The next one is the virtual tape machines. I used in 30 IPS. I didn't focus on the low end on this one. I put a higher value and I added a little bit of analog saturation. With the Soothe, I am using Nolly's Death Spike preset, and it is controlling and is smoothing out the guitars pretty well. And finally, I have sidechain compression for the snare. Whenever snare hits, maximum 1 dB compression is done. For the ghost notes, it's not happening too much, but for parts where snare should be dominant and present, I cut it from the guitars. The next one is actually the clean guitars where I use the plugin everywhere. Let's start from this one because it's much easier to explain. So on the overall clean guitar bus, I have another soothe where I am using it to create space for guitars, the rhythm guitars. I mean, whenever rhythm guitars are pushed, I duck it from here. I'm kind of selective and I only work on the sides since I hard pan left and right. And before that, I have this EQ where I cut a lot to not to clash with anything, not to create any build up. And after that, around this area, I also create some space for the guitar's frequency. That's a weird thing to say. And let me start with this one. The names are a little bit weird, but hopefully you will understand. I will play all of these in isolation. So long tension ambient is basically in the first we have compressor. So the long tension ambient is based on a single note. Let me play it for you. So it's pretty interesting. In order to control it, I put a compressor and I compressed heavily in a snappy mode and I didn't add anything else here. And after that, I have Architect Gojira X. I use my shimmery reverbed clean tone, but I cut it completely. And I have only chorus here. And I used X-Tension instead of my own reverb that I used in the Gojira X. Instead, I have a huge length and highly mixed and wet preset here. Without this, it sounds like this. That's what I call sound design. I mean, I don't know the official and technical terms here, but I think it does a pretty good job here. And thanks to this one, I have this continuous pedal note, and I really like this. And finally, I actually put a little bit more reverb. So I cut what I have here in the last pedal section and I put it here. So without this, let's hear it. And with. So the last part of the in the reverb tail, you hear some, I hear some shimmer effect. So it's actually coming from the Gojira. I mixed this like a week ago and I forgot this detail. So the next one is attack ambient, and you will understand why I call it that. Let's hear it in isolation. I used a Pliny no cap, but I actually enabled the cap. I know it's not a good name right now. I think this was one of Pliny's presets or something like that. No, it's something that I got it from somewhere or set it myself in a nice evening. And I use Pliny because when it comes to clean tones, it's one of the best. And I added X-Tension here with full length and half mix, so I can also hear the attack as well. That's the most important kind of parameter here. I know the rest is related to the design itself, but with the mix, it's where it becomes useful to everyone, basically. That's what I can say. Because whenever I want to push something into another instrument, like guitar to pad synth or guitar to a little bit with synth which has more low end, I can use this, and depending on the mix and maybe automating this mix, I can create different effects here. So let me disable this and you're gonna hear it. It does a great job. It does a great job. I really like this. I really like this. This is usually what I go for. And this plugin fits to my sound because I like this dark atmospheric movements. And I really think that this is the sound I should go for. And I always go for. Because normally when I use drones and samples that are kind of dark, but I can really come up with very harsh sound, like, I don't know, even a chainsaw sample, and I can smooth it out and create a drone out of it. And with the atmospheric, I'm saying atmospheric too much, I know, but the reverb and the mix level I set is making it pretty much useful, and I can use it throughout the riff to come up with an atmosphere that I can use to create dystopian, a little bit dark, full of tension. I'm literally using all the buzzwords in this plugin, but it really delivers what it wants to deliver, basically. The next one, before I talk even weirder, I am going to show you lead clean, which is doing the exact same thing in a tremolo motion in the first riff. Let's hear without. I put the mix a little bit lower here because I wanted the tremolo attack. The attack was a little bit too much, so I also increased the mix a little bit. I didn't want you to be confused about which instrument you are going to follow, but at the same time, this melody is the main melody that I was kind of trying to impose in the demo. That's why it exists, and that's why how this plugin is helping me to achieve. So the next one is single chords, which is a little bit simpler to explain because what I do is only play a chord and move it around. And by the way, on the previous one, I used again another Pliny and a lead preset that I had for a sleep token video, and I changed a little bit. I do that really often, really often. And on this one, I used a clean cave preset. I don't know whom I got this from, but this is kind of responsible for a lot of mid-range, which I probably put it back here. I pushed it a little bit up here in the 750, and I EQ'd a little bit after that, and I added the tension. And by the way, if you're interested, the EQ move is again pushing it a little bit more because I wanted to have first attack to punch the listener, not in real life. Punch your ear, basically. So that's how it sounds without the plugin. I really like this. The push that I had is a little bit too much maybe, and it is mostly coming from the second part of the process where I add shimmer and thickness, definitely compression, I don't know how much, around 2 dB, and EQ moves are basically not much. I just cut from 80 Hertz. It's nothing much actually. And the real move is the compression that I had, and I pushed it a little bit more with shimmer and thickness. But the real move is coming from here because with this, by adding the plugin here, I wanted to have a smaller room in context, but have the same atmosphere. I'm still using the same buzzword. Let me go to this one. This is octave ambient drone. As you can see from here, it is only used on the second part because I want to differentiate. There was a repetition. I want to add something else so it will increase the tension and push it a little bit more. And I used the Architect Gojira X here. Again, the same kind of presets and everything is on here. But I pushed it with a little bit more with the tension. Let's see what I did with and without. Not much, right? And now with. It is amazing. I started with, again, a very simple, not so tremolo picked this time, but continuous melody that is one octave down, where I used, where I played the main theme. I just want to support a little bit more the whole silent section, and by adding the plugin with a lot of mix and length, I just washed it and it became kind of a nice pad synth. I mean, I don't want to say pad synth here. It's just a drawing guitar, but it is hardly a guitar anymore. That's what I like about it, because it's an instrument that I am confident, and by using this and this plugin, I can create different texture and sounds that I can use in the demo, and hopefully in the future in my songs. And the next one is the leads, and leads are in two parts. The lead processing is pretty simple, saving space for the rhythm guitars, pushing a lot on the, I don't know how much, it's 5.9 dB on the 7K area to make it much more present. And after that, we have this Infinity EQ. I sidechained this one to the clean guitar so I can actually create some differences between that. So when I cut this area, it also creates space for the clean. I would usually go for mostly soothe, but I decided to use an EQ here. Interesting. So I double EQ'd this. Interesting. And we have the first tremolo melody, which is here. We can just hear now. I used Nocturnal X, and after that, with the lead sample, I feed it on a fully mix, actually, to the JST X-Tension without. And with. It is great. It's helping a lot. It also cuts the attack. It's not cutting it, it's just I'm pushing it too much that it is kind of become a little bit blurry in the attacks. I really like that, because I just wanted this one to support and again provide the main melody. Every part has the same melody but on a different texture, on a different timbre, and I change the riffs and how I approach to the demo or the context, however you want to call it. So this one has the exact same presets, but let me check. The length is smaller here and mix is also smaller, and I have a different filter. So this is without. As you hear, I cut the length a little bit, cut the mix a little bit. When I do it, we have more attack and we can push a little bit more of this. And without making or adding too much effort, now it's more audible. So for the audio design kind of things, I should kind of explain this one. This is how I produced this track and overall demo. I put the lead guitar, I added the extension while actually thinking about the parts, because if I don't do that, what's gonna happen is basically I have this part, I think it's cool, I think it fits, and after that I'm changing a lot. And right now maybe it's a good time to talk about X-Tension again with a small detail. I forgot talking about that. This thing is kind of real time. The processing, I'm not quite sure how CPU extensive it is, but it is happening pretty fast. I didn't even experience a lag, so I just put it there and I played over it. I think it's pretty cool because it gives you an ability to real time change the parameters and real time do some tracking. I think it's cool. I just want to mention that. And this is kind of important because, you know, Yasin, you added some extension to Snare. Why? That happened in the mixing. You added some extension in the room mics. Why? It happened in the mixing. I thought about it, it sounded cool, and I did it. But with the guitars, I did it in real time. I produced it in real time. I heard everything in real time, and I think it was cool, so I kept it and I tweaked it in the mixing. I didn't change anything too much. I didn't do any big moves when it comes to tone, when it comes to using the extension. And you will see that I use a lot of neural plugins here because every single plugin is emulating a pretty different amp, pretty different cab. Some is 410, some is 412, no 2x12s. I was about to say that, but that was wrong. That would be wrong. And different amp types, meaning different preamps, affecting the saturation a little bit differently. When I push the gain on one, it's affecting a little bit different if I push the same amount the gain. So for that reason, it's kind of important to mention. This covers all the instruments and leaves us with the sample, which is pretty easy to talk about because I just got them from Splice and just splashed them everywhere. But what I did here is actually using Soothe, and I sidechained the drums because I didn't want the impacts masking the kick. That was the main reason. So the drum is the main energy mover, so I didn't want to mask anything with this. And what we have here are samples that you can, let me isolate them so you can hear easily. And so on. And we also have this riser. And yeah, it's about it. I mean, that's the last one if you want to hear it. One small detail that this impact has, actually extension on a small 20% mix value, filtering only for lows, and we have 50% length. So that's how it sounds with and without. Let me put this. And now with. This is what I'm lacking when it comes to impacts, because I want an impact to have a huge tail that I can control. And this sample as itself has 1-2 seconds of length and it's kind of fading pretty quickly. And what I can control is how much I can push this one with the reverb tail. And overall texture, and again the same buzzword, atmosphere, is pretty effective when I use the extension. I talk about too much extension, but I mean this is the demo about, so yeah, that's why I did it. So I think that summarizes a lot of stuff. For some samples, for some instruments, I have these big moves, but this is mostly coming from what I want from that sample. Sometimes samples have too much information that I need to cut because I want a riser and it has a lot of harshness. What I do, like the example on this one, let me give you this EQ as an example here. This is without this EQ, and this is after the move I made. You know, mine, you know, after applying EQ, it sounds like there's a cab in a rainy day coming to you and passing you, and that level of rumble in the riser is what I need. I don't want something harsh because it's gonna take the focus from what you're actually hearing. So these kind of moves, it's normally happening while you're actually mixing the whole thing. What I want to talk about, and let me demonstrate again. This is without, and this is with. I reduced the harshness a lot. I destroyed it. And after that, push where I need the information. By doing this, I prevent that it's taking your focus to something else. This is what I do, and this is what my goal is with, especially with the samples. With the samples, sometimes you can control everything, or you need to find the perfect sample to work with. In my case, I heavily process them, or I don't process them at all, depending on if I need to do something. Something I like the sample, I just keep it. Or I say, oh my god, this is the impact I need, but it's not where it is. That's why I need to do these extra moves. That's what I'm trying to explain here. So that basically summarizes the whole mixing. I didn't give you every single decision I made, and that wasn't the goal because it makes the whole video pretty damn long, and I think it's pretty damn long already. If you have a question, please ask that. And if you have a really nice feedback that I can use and learn from you, you can also put that in the comment section. I want the comment section to have all the nice, comments, people talking and giving really nice insights about mixing, about production. That would be really nice. That's actually my dream. That is the community that I want to have one day. And hopefully this wraps up my decisions and decision making when it comes to how I use JST X-Tension and how I do the mixing for this demo. And finally, what I want to say, thanks for sticking around. Hopefully you liked the video. Please, if you're not subscribed, subscribe and turn on notification bell so you will get notified if I post something like this. And I will do my best to push the content like this. So if you have any suggestions, any requests, it would be really nice if you put in the comment section so I can think about it. And thank you so much, and hope to see you on the next one. Ciao.